9 years of deadened silence in his lower spine ended with a single, clumsy mistake. When the heavily overweight new maid slipped and her warm hand grazed the ruthless mafia boss's paralyzed calf, he didn't just feel a spark. He felt the terrifying realization that his doctors were lying. Bloodstains on a mahogany floor fade over time, but the memory of the ambush that took Gabriel Rossi's legs never did. It was October 2017 when rival associates cornered his armored SUV in downtown Manhattan. The shootout left 3 of his men dead, and a bullet lodged precariously against Gabriel's lower spine. The doctors at Mount Sinai delivered the grim verdict. He would never walk again. For 9 years, the head of the Rossi crime family ruled his empire from a custom-built, mechanized wheelchair. His terrifying reputation remained intact, but behind the heavily guarded walls of his sprawling estate in upstate New York, Gabriel was a bitter, isolated man. He fired nurses weekly, threw expensive porcelain at the walls, and trusted absolutely no one. Enter Beatrice Lawson. Beatrice did not look like the women who usually occupied the Rossi estate. The other maids and companions were sleek, hardened, and polished to a high, intimidating shine. Beatrice, on the other hand, was undeniably fat. At 260 pounds, her uniform constantly pinched at her waist and strained across her broad shoulders. She was soft, timid, and carried an air of constant apology. Her face was round, framed by messy brown curls that escaped her bobby pins by noon, and she sweated profusely whenever she had to carry fresh linens up the grand, sweeping staircase of the mansion. The other staff mocked her relentlessly behind her back, calling her a liability. But Beatrice desperately needed this job. Her younger sister was undergoing expensive chemotherapy treatments in Brooklyn, and the Rossi family paid their staff 3 times the standard rate in exchange for absolute suance and blind obedience. Her assignment to the master suite was supposed to be a punishment. The head housekeeper, a cruel woman named Agatha, handed Beatrice the master key card with a smirk, fully expecting the terrifying Don to fire the clumsy, chubby maid before lunchtime. Gabriel's bedroom was a sprawling, suffocating cavern of dark velvet and drawn curtains. When Beatrice first walked in, pushing her heavy cleaning cart, she was trembling so violently that the glass bottles of polish clattered together. Gabriel sat by the window, staring out at the grey Hudson River. He didn't even turn his head. He merely growled a command to clean the bathroom and stay out of his sight. For 3 weeks, this was their silent, oppressive routine. Beatrice would enter, breathing heavily from the stairs, her cheeks flushed a deep, embarrassed crimson. She scrubbed the marble floors on her hands and knees, her thick thighs aching against the hard stone, always acutely aware of the slunt, brooding monster in the wheelchair. Gabriel barely acknowledged her existence, save for occasionally glaring at her reflection in the glass. He found her constant, quiet panting annoying, but paradoxically, her undeniable lack of grace made her the least threatening person in his house. She was just a frightened, heavy girl trying to survive. Everything shifted on a freezing Tuesday morning. Beatrice was dusting the low bookshelves near Gabriel's medical bed. Her uniform was stifling, and a bead of sweat rolled down her temple. Gabriel was sitting in his chair a few feet away, seemingly asleep, a heavy wool blanket draped over his lifeless legs. As Beatrice reached for a high shelf, her thick rubber-soled shoe caught the edge of a Persian rug. With a sharp gasp, she lost her balance. Her heavy frame went tumbling backward. In a desperate bid to stop her fall, she flailed her arms, and her bare, warm hand slapped hard against Gabriel's exposed lower calf as the blanket slipped away. She hit the floor with a heavy thud, the wind knocked out of her lungs. Panic instantly seized her throat. She had touched the Don. She had touched the crippled legs he was so violently sensitive about. Beatrice scrambled backward on the carpet, tears of sheer terror springing to her eyes, fully expecting him to pull the silver pistol he always kept tucked in his armrest. But Gabriel wasn't reaching for his gun. His eyes were wide, staring down at his right leg. His chest heaved. He looked up at Beatrice. For the first time in 3,285 days, Gabriel Rossi had felt a distinct, burning sensation shoot up his nerve endings. It was faint, a microscopic prickle of heat where her fleshy palm had struck his skin. But it was undeniably there. "What did you just do?" Gabriel's voice was a gravelly, trembling whisper that chilled Beatrice to her very core. "I'm sorry," Beatrice sobbed, pressing her chin into her chest, her soft body shaking uncontrollably. "I slipped, Mr. Rossi. I swear on my life I didn't mean to. Please don't hurt me. I need this job. I'm so clumsy." "Shut up," he snapped. He grabbed the wheels of his chair, rolling himself violently toward her. Beatrice cowered, shielding her face. "Do it again." Beatrice froze, peeking through her thick fingers. "What?" "Touch my leg again," Gabriel commanded, his voice dropping into a lethal, urgent cadence. "Exactly where you just hit it. Do it right now, Beatrice." Hesitation hung thick in the cold bedroom air. Beatrice remained paralyzed on the floor, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She stared at Gabriel's pale, atrophied calf, then up at his desperate, commanding face. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely lift them. "Mr. Rossi, please," she whimpered, tears spilling over her flushed, round cheeks. "I don't understand." "Touch my leg." Gabriel leaned forward, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the armrests. "If you want to keep your job, your life, and your sister's hospital bed, you will put your hand exactly where it was." Hearing him mention her sister sent a shockwave of cold reality through Beatrice. She swallowed her sobs, nodding frantically. Crawling forward on her hands and knees, feeling incredibly self-conscious of how her stomach pressed against the fabric of her uniform, she reached out. Her warm, plump fingers hovered over his skin. "Press down," he ordered, his eyes tracking her every microscopic movement. Beatrice pressed her palm against his shin. She closed her eyes, waiting for a gunshot or a scream. Instead, she heard a sharp, ragged intake of breath. Gabriel's right leg twitched. It wasn't a spasm. It was a localized, undeniable reaction to external pressure. Gabriel closed his eyes, a single, violent tear breaking free and tracking down his scarred cheek. He could feel the warmth of her skin. He could feel the soft, fleshy weight of her hand pressing against a limb that Dr. Arthur Langdon, the most expensive, highly regarded neurologist in the criminal underworld, had sworn was permanently dead. "My God," Gabriel whispered, the words carrying the weight of a collapsing building. "They lied to me." Beatrice pulled her hand back quickly, clutching it to her chest as if she had been burned. She watched as a terrifying, murderous clarity washed over the mafia boss's face. If he had feeling in his legs, if the nerves were simply dormant or being chemically suppressed by the daily injections his private doctor administered, it meant his paralysis was not a tragic result of the ambush. It was a calculated, ongoing prison sentence designed by his own people to keep him confined to a wheelchair. "Beatrice," Gabriel said, his tone suddenly devoid of the rage that usually saturated his voice. He looked at her not as a clumsy, fat maid, but as the only person in his entire empire who wasn't actively plotting his demise. "Lock the door." Over the next few weeks, The atmosphere in the master suite fundamentally changed. To the outside world, and to the guards patrolling the halls, Beatrice was just the pathetic, heavy-set maid cleaning up after the boss's tantrums. But behind the locked, heavy oak doors, a deeply secretive and dangerous alliance was forming. Gabriel stopped taking the pain medications Dr. Langdon prescribed, hiding the pills in a hollowed-out book. Almost immediately, the fog in his mind lifted, and the faint tingling in his lower extremities intensified. But his muscles were severely atrophied from 9 years of disuse. He needed physical therapy, and he couldn't trust a single medical professional in his network. He only had Beatrice. Their secret sessions became a daily ritual. Beatrice would smuggle in deep tissue massage oils under her baggy uniform. Gabriel would lie on his back, sweating and gritting his teeth in agony, while Beatrice used her strong, capable hands to aggressively knead the deadened muscles of his thighs and calves. At first, she was terrified of hurting him, her touch too gentle, her apologies constant. But Gabriel pushed her. "Harder, Bea," he would grit out, his hands gripping the bedsheets. "Don't treat me like glass." As the days turned into weeks, the physical proximity between them birthed a strange, unspoken intimacy. Beatrice was hyper-aware of her size, often trying to make herself smaller when she sat on the edge of his bed. She hated the way her thighs spread out, hated the sweat that gathered on her brow from the physical exertion of moving his heavy limbs. But Gabriel never looked at her with the disgust she expected. In fact, Gabriel found himself fixated on her. He watched the deep concentration on her face, the gentle, nurturing way she spoke to him when the pain became too much. He noticed the surprising strength in her thick arms, and the comforting maternal warmth she radiated. In a world comprised of sharp edges, hollow loyalties, and starving, hollow-cheeked women who only wanted his money, Beatrice's softness became an intoxicating anchor. One afternoon, while Beatrice was stretching his right foot, a sharp cramp seized Gabriel's calf. He cursed loudly. Beatrice immediately dropped the oil, shifting her weight onto the bed and pressing her warm, heavy chest against his shin, using her body weight to force the muscle to lengthen. Gabriel stared at her flushed face, just inches from his knees. "Why do you hide yourself in those oversized clothes, Bea?" he asked quietly, the question slipping out before he could stop it. Beatrice froze. She slowly lowered his leg, her face burning. "I don't want to offend anyone, sir. I know I'm an eyesore." Gabriel reached out, his strong, calloused fingers catching her wrist before she could retreat. "Who told you that?" "Everyone," she whispered, looking down at her lap. "They are blind fools," Gabriel said, his voice a low, vibrating rumble that sent a shiver down her spine. "You are the most real thing in this entire house." Before Beatrice could process the heavy, loaded meaning behind his words, a loud, aggressive pounding echoed on the bedroom door. It was Leonardo Russo, Gabriel's fiercely ambitious underboss. "Boss," Leonardo's muffled voice barked from the hallway. "Dr. Langdon is here for your weekly nerve block injection. Open up." Gabriel's eyes darkened into black pits of pure malice. The nerve block. The very thing keeping him crippled. He looked at Beatrice, his grip on her wrist tightening into a silent promise of war. The time for hiding was ending. The time for vengeance was about to begin. Panic, sharp and metallic, tasted like copper in Beatrice's mouth. She scrambled off the bed, hastily pulling down the hem of her oversized uniform to cover her thick thighs, her heart pounding against her ribs. Gabriel, however, remained chillingly calm. He grabbed the small glass bottle of massage oil, shoved it under his thick mattress, and nodded toward the door. "Let them in," Gabriel commanded softly, masking the fiery vengeance burning in his dark eyes behind a veil of weary resignation. "Act completely normal. Keep your head down, and do not look at Russo." Beatrice wiped her sweaty palms on her apron, took a deep breath that strained the buttons of her collar, and unlocked the heavy oak doors. Leonardo Russo strode in immediately, his expensive Italian suit smelling sharply of cigar smoke and arrogant confidence. Behind him trailed Dr. Arthur Langdon, a thin, nervous man clutching a black leather medical bag. "Took you long enough, Beatrice," Leonardo sneered, looking her up and down with blatant disgust. "Go fetch some fresh ice. The boss looks like he's running a fever." "Yes, Mr. Russo," Beatrice mumbled, her chins dipping to her chest as she quickly shuffled toward the corner ice bucket, making herself as invisible as possible. She hated the way Leonardo looked at her, like she was a repulsive, pathetic creature occupying space she didn't deserve. But right now, being underestimated was her greatest weapon. "Arthur," Gabriel rasped, playing the part of the broken, helpless invalid to perfection. He let his head loll against the back of his mechanized wheelchair. "Make it quick today. My spine is killing me." "Of course, Don Rossi," Dr. Langdon replied, his voice trembling slightly as he opened his bag and prepared the syringe. It was a clear, viscous liquid, the nerve block, the poison keeping the king chained to his throne. From her corner, Beatrice watched in silent horror. She gripped the silver ice tongs so hard her knuckles ached. Dr. Langdon approached with the needle. Gabriel subtly shifted his weight. As the doctor bent down, aiming for the scarred tissue near Gabriel's lower lumbar, Gabriel feigned a sudden, violent muscle spasm in his upper back. His elbow jerked outward, knocking the syringe directly out of Dr. Langdon's hand. The needle shattered on the marble floor, the clear liquid pooling into the grout. "Damn it, Arthur!" Leonardo barked, slapping the back of the doctor's head. "That was the last vial we brought from the clinic." "My apologies, Leo," Gabriel sighed tiredly, rubbing his temples. "The tremors have been bad today." I can have more sent up from Manhattan by tomorrow morning," Dr. Langdon stammered, terrified of Leonardo's wrath. "Forget it. Do it tomorrow," Leonardo growled. He turned his predatory gaze to Gabriel. "Rest up, boss. You need your strength. The annual syndicate meeting is next Friday at the St. Regis, New York. All the major families are expecting you to dial in on the monitors, as usual." "I will be ready," Gabriel lied, his voice a low, gravelly promise. Once the men left, locking the doors behind them, the suffocating tension in the room snapped. Beatrice rushed to Gabriel's side, falling to her knees by his wheelchair. "That was too close," she whispered, her chest heaving. "They're going to kill you, Gabriel." He looked down at her, registering the fact that she had used his first name. He liked how it sounded. Coming from her soft, trembling lips. "They are going to try," he corrected her. He reached down, his strong hands gripping her broad, soft shoulders. "Help me up, Bea." Beatrice's eyes widened. "Up? Gabriel, you haven't put weight on your legs in—" "Help me up," he repeated, fiercely determined. She stood, bracing her heavy, solid frame against him. She wrapped her thick arms around his waist, deeply conscious of her own softness pressing against his hardened torso. Gabriel placed his hands on the armrests and pushed. His facial muscles bunched in absolute agony. For a terrifying second, his knees buckled, but Beatrice held fast, planting her wide feet and using every ounce of her 260 pounds to anchor him. Slowly, shakily, Gabriel Rossi stood. He towered over her, trembling violently, sweat pouring down his face. But he was standing. He looked down at Beatrice, who was crying silent tears of awe, supporting his weight with a fierce protective strength he had never experienced from a woman before. "You are my foundation, Beatrice," he whispered breathlessly, pressing his forehead against hers. "They look at you and see weakness. I look at you and see the only reason I am alive." Over the next week, the master suite became a secret boot camp. Gabriel's recovery was brutal and agonizing, but driven by pure, unadulterated hatred for Leonardo, his progress was terrifyingly fast. Beatrice was his constant shadow, his physical therapist, and increasingly, his lifeline. Late at night, when the pain kept him awake, she would read to him, her soothing voice calming the monster inside him. He began demanding she sit on the bed next to him, tracing the soft curves of her waist and hips, outright forbidding her from uttering another negative word about her weight. But their fragile bubble violently popped 3 days before the St. Regis meeting. Beatrice was in the downstairs laundry room, sorting Gabriel's linens, when she heard muffled voices behind the ventilation shaft. It was Leonardo and the head housekeeper, Agatha. "The paperwork is finalized," Leonardo was saying, his voice echoing through the metal vent. "At the St. Regis on Friday, I declare Gabriel mentally and physically unfit per Mafia Commission rules. Langdon signed the medical certificates. I take the seat as the new Don." "And the fat maid?" Agatha asked cruelly. "Dispose of her," Leonardo replied coldly. "She spends too much time in his room. Take her out back tonight. Make it look like she tripped and fell into the quarry." Beatrice's blood turned to ice. She dropped the heavy laundry basket and bolted for the service stairs, desperate to reach Gabriel. But as she rounded the corner into the darkened kitchen, a heavy, gloved hand clamped over her mouth. A sharp, stinging pain bit into her neck, and the world dissolved into blackness. Blood pounded fiercely in Gabriel's temples as he stared at the empty, perfectly made bed. It was Thursday morning, 24 hours before the syndicate gathering. Beatrice had never missed a morning shift. He checked the hollowed-out book, where they hid the massage oils. It hadn't been touched. A cold, venomous dread pooled in his stomach. When Agatha entered the room carrying a breakfast tray, completely devoid of Beatrice's usual heavy, panting presence, Gabriel knew. "Where is Beatrice?" he asked, his voice dead flat, staring out the window from his wheelchair. "Oh, the clumsy girl quit in the middle of the night, Mr. Rossi," Agatha lied smoothly, setting the silver tray down. "Said the work was too hard on her joints. We've already contacted an agency for a replacement." Gabriel did not blink. He did not scream. He simply analyzed the chessboard. Leonardo had made his move. If they had killed Beatrice, they wouldn't have bothered lying about her quitting. They would have orchestrated an accident. She was alive, being held as collateral to ensure Gabriel didn't do anything unpredictable before the transition of power. They underestimated her, and they have entirely forgotten who I am. Friday evening arrived in a shroud of freezing rain. The heavily guarded ballroom at the St. Regis, New York, was packed with the most dangerous men on the eastern seaboard. Cigars glowed in the dim golden light as the heads of the 5 families took their seats around a massive mahogany table. Leonardo Russo stood at the head, wearing a triumphant, arrogant smirk. He tapped a silver spoon against his crystal glass, calling the room to order. "Gentlemen," Leonardo announced, "for 9 years, we have honored Don Gabriel Rossi. But a crippled king cannot defend his borders. I have here verified medical documents from Dr. Arthur Langdon, confirming Gabriel's deteriorating mental state and permanent physical paralysis. Under Commission Rule 7, I am stepping up to claim the seat." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the ruthless crowd. Power abhorred a vacuum, and Gabriel had been out of the public eye for too long. "Does anyone object?" Leonardo asked, raising his hands, savoring his victory. "I object." The deep, booming voice didn't come from a speaker system. It came from the grand double doors at the back of the ballroom. The heavy mahogany doors flew open, crashing against the walls. The entire room went dead silent. Cigars dropped onto expensive silk ties. Leonardo Russo's face drained of all color, his jaw slacking in absolute, unadulterated horror. Gabriel Rossi was not in a wheelchair. He was standing, dressed in a pristine charcoal black tailored suit. Gabriel looked like the Grim Reaper made flesh. He wasn't using a cane. He wasn't leaning on anyone. His steps were slow, calculated, and carried the heavy, terrifying weight of absolute authority as he walked down the center aisle of the ballroom. "Gabriel," Leonardo stammered, backing away from the table, his knees practically giving out. This is impossible. Your spine—" "My spine is perfectly fine, Leo," Gabriel said, his voice cold enough to freeze the blood in Leonardo's veins. He stopped mere inches from his traitorous underboss. "Though I cannot say the same for yours." With lightning speed, Gabriel drew the heavy silver pistol from his shoulder holster and struck Leonardo across the jaw with the heavy grip. Leonardo collapsed to the floor in a heap of shattered teeth and blood. The room erupted into chaos, but Gabriel fired a single shot into the crystal chandelier above, sending shards of glass raining down and instantly silencing the mob bosses. "Arthur Langdon has been dealt with," Gabriel announced to the terrified room, wiping a speck of blood from his cuff. "He confessed everything before my men put him in a trunk bound for the bottom of the East River. Leonardo engineered my paralysis. He poisoned my medical supply for 9 years. He is no longer part of this family." Gabriel looked down at the bleeding, pathetic man on the floor. "Where is she, Leo?" "I don't know what you're talking about," Leonardo cried, spitting blood. Gabriel leveled the gun directly at Leonardo's forehead. "You have 3 seconds to tell me where Beatrice is, or I will paint this beautiful carpet with your brains. 1, 2, the basement at the Brooklyn warehouse," Leonardo screamed, sobbing now. "Near New York Presbyterian Hospital. She's locked in the basement." Gabriel didn't hesitate. He pulled the trigger, ending Leonardo's reign of betrayal instantly. The gunshot echoed through the silent ballroom. Gabriel holstered his weapon, adjusting his jacket. He looked at the stunned heads of the 5 families. "The meeting is adjourned," Gabriel stated coldly. "I have to go pick up my queen." An hour later, heavily armed men stormed the Brooklyn warehouse. Gabriel kicked the basement door open himself, refusing to let anyone else go first. In the corner of the damp, freezing room, Beatrice was tied to a chair. She was bruised, shivering, and her uniform was torn. But when she looked up and saw Gabriel, standing under his own power, bathed in the harsh light of the doorway, she let out a shattered, sobbing gasp of relief. Gabriel rushed forward, dropping to his knees on the concrete floor. He pulled a knife, slicing through the thick zip ties binding her wrists. The moment she was free, Beatrice threw her heavy, soft arms around his neck, weeping uncontrollably. "You came," she sobbed, holding on to him as if he were the only solid thing in the universe. "You walked to me. I would walk through hell for you, Beatrice," Gabriel swore, burying his face in her messy, sweat-dampened hair, wrapping his arms fiercely around her thick waist. He pulled back just enough to frame her tear-stained, round face in his large hands. "You saved my life. You gave me my legs back. no one will ever disrespect you again. From today until the day I die, you sit at my right hand. You sit. He kissed her, deeply and fiercely, pouring 9 years of kind passion and profound, unshakable gratitude into the embrace. Beatrice kissed him back, the clumsy, self-conscious maid dying in the darkness of that basement, reborn as the undisputed, fiercely protected reigning queen of the Rossi Empire. Did you see that epic takedown coming? Gabriel proved that true loyalty and fierce love come in all shapes and sizes, and nobody messes with his queen. If this thrilling tale of vengeance, betrayal, and dark mafia romance had you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button right now. Share this video with your friends. Leave a comment with your favorite plot twist. And don't forget to subscribe for more intense, real-life drama stories.